We are live. Welcome Facebook, welcome Instagram to Office Hours. Hi, Mom. Thanks for joining. Today I've got some good questions for you. I've got some technical advice. I've got some non-technical advice, and I've got some questions for everyone. So we're going to start the day by lighting our small business appreciation candle that we made 2 weeks ago. We made these 2 weeks ago to show our solidarity and hope that Air School survives the current economic crisis. Welcome to Office Hours. Topics today are going to be about the general mentality required to work on cars. We're going to talk about winter storage, how to prep your car for storage in the winter. We're going to talk about how to revive your car once spring comes around and it won't start. We're going to talk about my tour that I have tentatively planned and also not tentatively planned. We're going to do a Q&A, as we always do, with quarantine VW activities that you can do at home in your own garage. And we're going to talk about remote tech help that I also offer from the comfort of your own garage and my own office, which is also my bedroom and my music room. So the first question I got asked in last week's Q&A that I wasn't able to respond to was, breaking it down, is it difficult to work on cars if you've never done it before? And what are some skills that I'm going to need to have? And I was actually asked this by a bicycle mechanic, and I thought it was really funny because of all the people that I've worked with, the ones who are most successful on their own all seem to know how to work on bicycles. So I'm not going to tell you to go out and get a bicycle and learn to work on it. But what I will say is that you'd be surprised how many skills from different activities transfer over into working on cars. I'm going to go out and say it that yes, I think working on cars can be difficult, but it's also extremely rewarding. And the level of difficulty is really only what you're comfortable taking on. If you're not comfortable doing engine rebuilds, start with an oil change. If you're not comfortable adjusting valves, start with a cleaning and lubrication of the distributor, that kind of thing. So yes, to answer the question from last week, working on cars can be challenging, but I would not have anyone doing homework assignments for their air schooled lesson days if I didn't think you could do it. So if I've given you a task that seems Herculean and way over your head, I promise, I believe in you, you can totally do it. So tour update. My tour is on hold. That's it. That's as much as I know right now. So if you've given me a deposit, thank you. You may ask for it back at any time. But right now, my plan is to leave California when it is safe to do so and help as many people on the road as I can. So if I see you this summer, great. I really look forward to it. And if I don't get to see you this summer, I'm sorry. I will be back on the road next spring. I promise, if it's safe to do so. That is that. So winter storage and your Volkswagen. I have on my website, airschooled.com, a list called Winterizing and Awakening Your Car. It's what to do when winter storage is coming close and you want to prep your car for storage, and then also what to do in the spring. And I want to read a little bit of that to you right now. Airschooled.com. In the Resources tab, you will find on the left-hand side a Winterizing worksheet. It is a nice checklist that you can use to make sure that you're doing everything you can to ensure that your car has a successful winter storage and spring awakening. I've divided it into chapters, or rather subsections, by part of your car, so like body and frame, suspension, brakes and wheels. And I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but the biggest takeaway I can give you for how to store your car for the winter is put it away hot. Do the longest drive you can before you finally put it away, and do not start the car again until spring. It seems counterintuitive, but one of the worst things you can do for your engine is to start your car and let it run and shut it off without really warming it up. This allows moisture to build up in the engine, and it allows like acids and those corrosive elements to cause harm inside your engine. And we don't want that. We don't want moisture in the oil that comes from sitting. We want to burn that moisture out with a long drive and leave it that way. If you have to drive the car, I recommend driving it more than half an hour to really warm things up. So to continue on with the maintenance list, or the winterizing list rather, yes, there are some obvious ones like disconnect your battery and remove it, and checking with your insurance company to make sure that you're all good for storage and your intended use or non-use. I recommend changing the oil before you store it. That way, any moisture that is left in the oil is surely removed. The spring awakening checklist is a lot shorter than the winterizing checklist. And I do this a little bit on purpose, but a little bit because it's chemically and physically sound. Do most of your work before storage. That way, when it comes time to driving your Volkswagen in the spring, there's only 6 or 7 things that you need to do. And since many people out there right now are waking up their Volkswagens from their winter storage, I want to read you a little bit about the Wakeup Procedure. I do a couple things like washing and drying all the painted surfaces and all the glass and all the chrome. I open all the windows, let it air out. That kind of stuff's obvious. One thing I do is I really apply the foot brake firmly several times, and I check for leaks. That way we don't want to get going down the road in spring and have the windows open in the nice weather and then realize we have no brakes because there's been a leak. So check for leaks after you've applied the pedal a couple times at the master cylinder underneath the driver's seat or in front of the feet and at all four wheels. I trickle charge the battery before the intended use, and I also do occasional trickle chargings throughout the winter, and I always keep the battery in a climate controlled environment. My battery is 9 years old and I got it used and it's still going to this day. So I do really think that taking care of your battery can save you money in the long run. Remove any mothballs, tinfoil, or steel wool you have blocking off various openings in your car. Make sure it's registered and insured and drive it. That's the best thing you can do for your car come spring awakening is taking it on the longest drive you can. That's going to burn out any moisture. It's going to fully heat things up, get your engine fully heat expanded, get a feel for the road. Remember what your car is like. Smile a bit, smile a bunch. Don't care. Really go for the longest drive you can muster. And I really recommend that anytime you let the car sit more than a couple of weeks is just wake it up. Make it do its thing. It's a car. It's designed to drive it. So someone asked me, what are some other quarantine activities that you've been doing at your house with your Volkswagens? And I made on Instagram, which you can't see because my phone's over there. I made a quarantine bingo sheet, which I really encourage everyone to follow Instagram at AirSchooled. You'll see in my story highlights, number one on the page is VW bingo. You can check off all the things that you've done at your home. These are all activities that are designed to be done with either basic chemicals and tools or no tools at all, just something like a rag to clean your upholstery. I've got 24 different borderline fun maintenance activities that you can do, like oil changes, valve adjustments, cleaning your upholstery, washing the windows, polishing and waxing the chrome, things like that. So if you're into working on your VW in your spare time, in your social distancing, check out Instagram.com/AirSchooled or at AirSchooled on the gram, and you'll find my bingo sheet. If you make a bingo sheet, tag your friends and tag me so I see how much you're doing. Sometimes I feel a bit of an underachiever, but then I see that some people have not achieved bingo yet. I only bingoed 4 times. I really thought I'd have bingoed 5 or 6 times, but hey, that's what we got. So today in the question and answer segment, again, fewer questions than a couple weeks ago, but really high quality questions. And I appreciate everyone that asked so far. I want to start with one that my mom asked because she has a sweet 1969 convertible bug in beautiful red. It's one of my favorite cars to drive, and it really does drive like almost a new car. Is it ever too hot to drive your Volkswagen? And I have to say, if your Volkswagen is in stock shape, no, just drive it. Pay attention to the engine. You smell the car every time you pull up to a stoplight after a freeway run, or every time you park it in the garage. You know what it smells like. And oil that smells sweet and a little pungent is totally fine. That's normal when oil gets hot because it's an engine. It gets hot. Let it get hot. Let it do its thing. And it's fine. If you have a modified engine or performance upgrades, something that might increase the amount of heat, I don't have an answer for you because I have only driven stock Volkswagens in temperatures over 120 degrees, and I have not had any heat-related issues with them. So drive your car. Just do it. Someone asked about tuning the airflow meter on their fuel-injected car. I'm assuming it was a bus. I think it was a bus. That's a really, really deep topic that I don't have time to get into today. But if anyone wants to loan me a fuel-injected car, I'm happy to make an instructional video on what the airflow meter does. I just don't have one with me, so I can't show you a good example of what to do. For those of you that are just learning, an airflow meter is a device with a flap on the inside that senses how much air comes into the engine and goes through. If it's a little bit of air, it only pushes the flap a little bit. If it's a lot of air, it pushes the flap a lot. And this is how the fuel injection computer knows how much fuel to dispense. And it knows what your throttle is doing and how the engine's responding. So it's a nice way for your car to manage fuel. Fuel injection was pretty much standard on all Volkswagens after 1975, and even down to 1968 on the Type 3s, Type 4s, and Porsche equivalents that use VW engines. So tuning the airflow meter is something that I don't recommend doing unless you have a way to monitor what you're doing. And I never, ever, ever adjust it without marking exactly where the starting point is. So if I goof something up, I can totally just go back to the way it was, no harm, no foul, and try again. So the next question was asked, how big of a spoiler is appropriate for a VW bus? And I had to look up the drag coefficients because I'd always heard this rumor that VW buses had really low drag coefficients for their day and age. And it's true that a VW bus has a drag coefficient of 0.42. It is actually more aerodynamic than a VW Bug. I learned that today. Checking my notes, getting ready to make this broadcast. I learned that a VW bus is actually more aerodynamic than a VW Bug. A VW bus actually has the same drag coefficient as a BMW E10, also known as the 2002 or the 1600. It's one of my other favorite cars. It uses a beautiful mechanical fuel injection system that was pioneered during World War II to allow the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, to fly upside down, because a carburetor can't go upside down and trickle fuel out downwards when it's upwards or upwards when it's downwards. So the fuel injection system on those cars is beautiful. If you've never ridden in a BMW 2002, I highly recommend, if you can find a fuel injection version, go for a drive. Those are excellent cars, and they have the same drag coefficient as a VW bus. So that's something cool that I learned today. Hello, everyone that's joining me in the comments. Ramona, Vincent, Derek. Hello. Vincent asks, an external oil filter addition to a 1641 dual port in a 69 bus is a benefit? I don't know. That's a very deep question that's going to involve asking your engine what it's like. Something like doing regular oil changes and dragging a magnet through your oil. Hi, Rochelle. Great question. Comment. Dragging a magnet through your oil is going to tell you if there's any metallic wear and tear, but that doesn't help you with your your engine bearings. Bearings are made of soft lead, which is non-ferrous and not going to get attracted by a magnet. But I really recommend getting to know your engine and seeing what it's like. If you have the kind of the engine that gives you a gritty paste in your oil every time you change it, a filter might be helpful. On a stock engine that sees regular oil changes and has an impeccably clean air filter, I don't find that there's a need for a filter. I stripped my engine down. It had about 30,000 miles on it years ago in 2016. And I found that all except for one of the engine bearings was still in the brand new engine tightness. None of the bearings had any measurable wear except for the number 2 main bearing, which is one of the hardest working bearings. So I can't bring myself to do it. I can't bring myself to cut holes in my engine and drill things and run hoses that leak and put on a $5 oil filter for something that doesn't really seem to have that big of an effect. When you consider that the Type 1 engine has an expected lifespan of 80 to 100,000 miles in a bus and maybe a little more in a Bug, the oiling system and oil filtration is not the weak point of the engine. If you've solved all the other weak points like valve train geometry and valve guide wear and cylinder head compression leaks, then maybe we can start to talk about that. But until then, I'm just not sure it's worth it for me. Next question was, what is the best way to clean wire connectors? I don't have any wires here with me, but what I do know is that white wine vinegar is exceptionally good at cleaning copper electrical connections. If you have really good quality electrical crimps from the factory and you just want to clean them up, I use a wire wheel on a Dremel, or you can dunk them in white wine vinegar and let them go. You're going to want to neutralize the acidic solution, though, either thoroughly rinsing it with water or a solvent like carburetor cleaner or baking soda or something to rinse the acid off once you're done. But white wine vinegar works really well when you don't want to take apart the stock electrical connections. If you do want to take them apart, I recommend getting a proper factory F-type terminal connector and F-type terminal crimper that is ratcheting. You can get them on Amazon for like 40, 50 bucks, and using factory style crimps. Email me if you need a link to part numbers for those crimps. What is the first trip you're going to take once the social distancing laws start to relax? I modified that question a little bit because there's a lot of he said, she said things about what's going to happen in the future. And I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a health professional. I'm not going to make those judgments. But once it's safe to do so, the first trip I'm going to take is to the beach. I'm going to surf. I'm going to lay in the sand, and I'm going to get a sunburn. And that is what I'm going to do. So let me know in the comments what you all plan on doing with your first big road trip after social distancing regulations let up a little bit. What tire pressures do I run in my 1969 convertible Bug? Wow, I think my mom wrote this one again. Thanks, Mom. As with any Volkswagen, check your factory tire pressure sticker for what I recommend. In the Bug, it should be in the glove box on the back, unless you would have a bad paint shop that is painted over them. In which case, I recommend 18 to 20 PSI in the front, 28 to 30 PSI in the rear. And that's sort of based on the factory pressures with a little bit of extra pressure if you're going to be doing long distance freeway running, that 20 in the front, 30 in the rear. If you're around town driving and you have what I call an ice cream car or a car that's more for short trips and fun driving, I run the factory pressure 18 in the front, 28 in the rear. It works well and it's safest. That is why I'm a stickler for correct tire pressures. Is your car was crashed by the people who designed it, and they found that the pressures they recommend are the safest. One thing you have to be aware of if you have a late 60s, early 70s is that sometimes the stickers don't talk about radial tires. We all have radial tires nowadays, so use the pressures from the 1970s manuals, 75 to 79 manuals, because tire technology was catching up then, but the cars themselves didn't change much. So bugs, 18, 28 front rear. Buses, I recommend 30 in the front, 40 to 44 in the back. If you do a lot of highway miles, again, go up 2 or 3 PSI, and that's what I do. I am not afraid to drop my pressures down to the 15 to 20 range if I'm going through a lot of sand or a lot of really loose dirt, but I do have an air compressor on board. So something I recommend if you're doing a lot of off-roading is an onboard air compressor. Otherwise, kind of a useless tool. Derek says, driving the Subaru down to SD. If you drive... Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you meant the old 90s Subaru that was a hot trash fire. But yeah, come down to SD. Anytime, you're always welcome here. If anyone is ever in San Diego and needs mechanical assistance, I am here. If anyone is in San Diego and needs a place to crash overnight, my driveway is open to fellow Volkswagen enthusiasts. So another question from a bicycle mechanic, which again, I think is super cool because bicycle mechanics and Volkswagen mechanics have very little in common other than precision counts. The question was, what tools do I carry on board? And the tool debate can go for ages, really. Many people can talk about what tools they take for like an entire weekend. And yes, I have enough tools to overhaul an engine, but that's not for me. That's for all my clients that I serve on my tours. But what I find funny is that I've done long distance bike rides. I did a few hundred miles last spring along the California coast from San Luis Obispo to Los Angeles. And I found that my onboard tool philosophy was the same in my bike riding and in my Volkswagen experience, that I'm not a very good bicycle mechanic. So sure, I have tons of bicycle tools, but I don't really know how to use them. And I'm not sure I'd want to. I would probably just call a friend and tell him to pick me up on my bicycle. The same way that I don't typically carry a ring compressor in my Volkswagen, because if you need a ring compressor, it means you're rebuilding an engine. And that's not something I want to do on a road trip. So my number one recommendation for bicyclists and for Volkswagen enthusiasts is to carry the tools that you know how to use, that you know what they're used on. It doesn't do anything if you have a 32 millimeter socket if you don't know what it's going to be used on, even though you might know how to use it. Know how to use it, know what it's used on, and consider, is it worth the weight and the space that it takes up? Sure, it would be nice for me to have a bench grinder and a lathe and a milling machine, but it's just not worth the space that it would take up in my car. It'd probably take up like 3/4 of the car. I'd rather have my bed and my clothes and my tools. So same thing is true on my bike. When I went on a long trip, I took a couple small tools and a couple of spare tubes and said that if something worse than this happens, I probably don't know what I'm doing, so I'm not going to worry about it. And it was fine. I got a good question on Instagram. Do you recommend venting valve covers to help with overheating? VW Bus 1969. One of my favorite years of VW buses, in fact. That is a multi-layered question because the answer depends on the size of your engine, the displacement of your engine, and the condition of your engine, whether or not it's new, old, new and well-built, new and poorly built, that kind of thing. In general, I do not recommend venting the valve covers because oil has to get from the valve covers down the pushrod tubes back into the engine. And even though the pushrod tubes have a slight downwards angle, the oil needs all the help it can get getting in there. And if the valve covers are vented, as the oil level rises, the air that's in the top of the valve cover is just going to get pushed out the vent. If the valve covers aren't vented, yes, the oil that rises is going to start to compress the air and create a high pressure environment, which may lead to leaks if you're not careful. But it also encourages the oil to return down to the crankcase quicker. And I think it's more important to have the oil in the crankcase than in the valve cover, especially because in a stock engine, the oil in the valve cover can reach almost halfway up the cover in normal operation. So I think it's important to have that oil back in the crankcase. You'll notice that on a stock VW, in a hard right turn with low oil in the engine, you'll see your oil pressure drop and the oil light may flicker. This is really common on freeway on-ramps when the engine is cold because the thick oil is all in the valve cover and it can't drain back to the crankcase quick enough. So I am in favor of getting the oil back in the crankcase as quick as possible. If your engine has breathing problems that's prohibiting it from venting all the internal pressure, I would check into why that pressure exists, because even on a 2-liter engine like the factory buses, with a 74 millimeter crank and 91, 92 millimeter pistons, they only needed a breather diameter of about 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch, so not very much. And they also did not vent the valve covers. Len Hoffman and it might have been Jake Raby, I'm not sure, did an experiment on Type 4 engines in the racing environment. 6,000 RPM. These engines, there's a lot going on inside these engines, and they found that venting the valve covers was not helpful to the overall oil and pressure control inside their engine. So I'm not going to do it. It also just makes it a pain in the ass when you adjust valves. And if you drive as much as I do, you adjust your valves quite a bit. So thanks for asking the question. Again, if you have a problem with blow-by and oil leakage, find the root of the problem. Don't just masquerade with a Band-Aid. That was a nice rhyme. Don't be surprised if I put that in a song. So that was the questions I had for this week. I want to take time now, because I've been ignoring my responsibilities as a business owner, and remind everyone that I do one-on-one video chat consultations with any VW owners, stock, modified, air-cooled, water-cooled. There's probably something I can help you with if you have a question. If you're tired of internet forums and Facebook pages giving you all kinds of conflicting information, and frankly, a lot of forums are not too friendly. If you want a one-on-one straight answer to your question that is comprehensive and competent, let me know. I do Skype, Zoom, FaceTime, Discord, any of those various channels to video chat on, I help with. It's $1 a minute. So have your questions written beforehand, have good internet service wherever you plan to be, and hopefully that can be with your car so you can show me what's going on and I can see what's going on in your cars. Another question I was just asked is, what are your current engine plans? When is your next rebuild coming? I hope not for a very long time. I've been involved with a few rebuilds this year. Ian just joined us on Instagram. Hi, Ian. I've been involved with a few rebuilds this year. One of them was at his house in Miami, Florida. And I'm not in any rush to rebuild my current engine. It's running quite nicely. It doesn't consume a lot of oil. I get about 20 miles of the gallon on the freeway, so I can't complain. Hopefully it will be many, many years before I have to dig back into the engine. Full disclosure, I do keep a spare engine in my garage ready to go all the time, just in case the worst could happen on tour. It'd be easy to ship me my engine. So those are all the questions I got this week. Thank you for everyone who submitted through Instagram and Facebook. And I look forward to more questions next week. Did anyone out there happen to try assembling a CV joint and beat my abysmal time of 54 seconds last week? I'd like to know if you did, because like I said, mine wasn't great. So if you beat my time of 54 seconds, I will do it again on camera to see if I can beat your time. If I cannot beat your time, I will send you an air-schooled sticker or two, as well as some other stuff I'm working on. Brings me to my next topic. I am almost out of stickers. So while they're no longer for sale, I'm going to be working on some new ones soon. I want to know what people think about new shirts. I'm a big fan of the simplicity of these shirts with the orange and white bus. Tell me what you think you would order. Would you rather go for something like this shirt that's really high quality tri-blend with a custom tag that includes some secrets about your Volkswagen? Or would you rather have a more basic shirt, thick cotton that's good for working in the garage? I'm going to be making some shirts soon, but I'm not sure what I'm going to make. So if you have some thoughts, let me know in the comments or in a message, and I look forward to hearing from everyone about that. That is all the time and questions I have today. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I really hope that someone somewhere has learned something from any of these broadcasts, because they're tremendously fun to do. And I really appreciate, again, everyone asking questions. So until next time, let me know if you've got tech questions of your own, and I'll see you on the web.